So we're going to talk about modernism, which is generally considered to span from 1900 to 1945. So that's like sort of the beginning or the end of Queen Victoria's reign to the end of the Second World War. So modernism is when the world's pace began to speed up and focus on industrialism. So what this means is that once upon a time, the middle and upper classes would get up, their servants would bring them their newspaper, they would have breakfast, and maybe they'd go and see a show in the afternoon and go to a dinner party in the evening. It was not a particularly packed day, but as industrialism and working 9 to 5 became more in vogue, lifestyles changed, and so often that meant things like philosophy and spirituality and culture. They all got pushed aside in terms of things of making money, selling, and expansion. So a lot of people were really depressed by this, artists in particular. So it's a common description of the modernist era that they felt overwhelmed by modern life. So this usually comes down to like a time motif. So you'll find a lot of modernists writing about time being contracted or running out of time or having very small periods of time. So there's a line in T.S. Eliot's poetry where he says, "I have measured out my life in coffee spoons." And so that's showing that the portions of his life seem very small and insignificant. But we'll talk more about T.S. Eliot later. So modernism is characterized in literature by self-consciousness of being a writer or an artist. So what we mean by self-consciousness is that they're not just writing a poem about a flower, they're writing about a writer writing about a poem about a flower. So they're thinking very consciously about how they present themselves on the page, persona, characterization, that sort of thing. And there's also a sense of experimentation with form as well as content. So once upon a time, you might have written a poem and it would be left aligned down the page, maybe broken up into stanzas. But in modernism, you might find that, some stanzas are aligned on the right, there might be some broken up lines in the middle, and so they're kind of using the page as space as well as just writing the poem. So that's what we mean by sort of experimental form. So there are a lot of other influences on modernism. One of the big ones was science. So we had Freud coming up with psychology and the notions of the subconscious, which meant our view of what the self or the individual was became challenged, because the subconscious is this whole realm of other thoughts we didn't even know we had. There was Einstein's relativity, and that told us that reality wasn't quite what we thought it was either, so lengths could be contracted and things like that. And so basically all of our traditionally held views and notions about reality and the physical world were kind of thrown into question. So that's very evident in the art and the literature of the time. So art was becoming basically a little bit crazy and literature was becoming lean and concise because nobody really wanted to commit to the idea of their interpretation of the world. They wanted to try and put the world out there and let other people draw their own conclusions. So the literature tended to become focused on visual detail without a lot of metaphor. Cubism, Dada, and Surrealism were the three big art movements of the day, and we're going to talk about each of those in turn later. What's important to realize is that when we talk about the values in the different art movements, you can see those same values reflected in the literature, so it's a very symbiotic relationship. Another big influence on modernism is World War I. So 20% of the world's population died, either in trench warfare or because of the Spanish flu. So that's a very post-apocalyptic sort of thing to live through. And it created a sense of despair, a lack of reality, and a sense of meaninglessness. So all of the old traditionally held values were kind of getting destroyed by these experiences. Then we had the rise of communism. So Marxism and the Russian Revolution of 1905 fueled the desire for a more utopian society. So in the Western world, we looked at the war and thought, well, that didn't work. And we looked at capitalism, which seemed to be failing the large number of poor people. And we're sort of striving around looking for a better option. And at this particular point in history, the idea of socialism, which was supposed to care for everyone in the society, was looking pretty good. After World War I, which went from 1914 to 1918, we had the Roaring Twenties, which was essentially a reaction to the war. People focused on drinking, gambling, dancing, and fun. So basically, once you've lived through something as post-apocalyptic as World War I, and all of your traditional values are shattered, it's kind of like, why try? Why not just have a big party? Because nothing really matters anyway. So a lot of the 20s was just about self-indulgence and that kind of expression of relief maybe after World War I. The cool wit and nonchalance of the 20s, plus the rise of jazz music in America, really influenced American modernists. And so we have F. Scott Fitzgerald coining the term the Jazz Age.